All right, good people. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know when you will receive this video, but I'm gonna briefly go over the pre-cal syllabus for you guys who are interested in taking pre-cal at some point in your high school career. So I'm going to go over the course sequence for you to give you some information that you will need to pay attention to. You will need as it can help you build on your foundation. So for Unit 1 says polynomial, rational, and radical functions. And so the easiest thing that you can do is study and look up what a polynomial function is, what a polynomial expression is, and what the graph looks like. Once you understand what those functions and expressions are and what the graph looks like, everything else pretty much builds off of that and starts to come into play. And so you see it says create, graph, and interpret radical and rational functions. Um, Radicals, again, are dealing with quadratics and square roots. Rationals are real numbers, so we're not dealing with imaginary numbers on that part. And so once you have to get that understanding and that foundation, that will help you for that Unit 1 concept. Unit 2 is exponential and log functions. The biggest thing with exponential and log functions that you need to understand and know is the identities. And so what equals what? How can I take a logarithmic function and put it in exponential notation and vice versa? So the math assignment I gave you guys will kind of help you get a foundation on exponential and logarithm functions. All right, Unit 3 says trigonometric functions. So this is a little bit different from what you did in geometry, but you're going to use that geometry foundation that you have. So the understanding of sine, cosine, and tangent, you're going to be able to use it here. And so they're going to give you a unit circle. And with the unit circle, it's the same thing that we did where we had, radians. Well, degrees equal radians on the unit circle. And on that unit circle, those degrees, those radians, they equal specific coordinates. And so just understanding, hey, if I have the tan of 30 degrees, it's, pi over 6 or, pi 3 pi over 2, and then that equals a coordinate. So you'll have to get an understanding of what the unit circle is. I would say just Google the unit circle so you can kind of see it, and then you can work through problems from there. Then it just says create, graph, and interpret trig functions and use the model real world nomia for it, right? So you got to be able to use the identities. You got to understand the trig functions, how they operate, how they maneuver. And again, this is Unit 3, so you'll have a foundation already set in the class, some habits already set in the class that will help you out with this process. Unit 4, analytic geometry and matrices, right? So this one is different because now we're talking about matrices. So matrix multiplication, it almost goes back to your elementary days where you figured out how to multiply two-digit numbers by two-digit numbers. You used a matrix. You didn't just do vertical multiplication, right? So you used a matrix. You created a box, and with that box, you had numbers on the outside in a vertical position and numbers on the outside in a horizontal position up top and on the left-hand side. And then you just multiply those numbers from each box. That's what a matrix is. So matrix multiplication, matrices, that's what you would get into through this one. So it says plot points in a polar coordinate system. You understand how to do that. Represent, model, and perform operations on vectors, including vectors in a complex plane. Once you understand the foundation of how to do matrix multiplication, how to deal with matrices, then you'll be able to understand this part. And again, this is setting you up for calculus. So it might not be that detailed in class, but however, you will need to know what a matrix is, know what matrices are, and so forth. Sequence, series, and limits. So here is purely getting you ready for calculus, because calculus you have to evaluate integrals, and integrals have to do with limits, right? So for instance, what does the function y equals x, what does that go to as x increases to infinity? What happens to that function? Does it get closer to a number? Does it not get closer to a number? Does it equal infinity? So those are the things you will be working on here. So it says create arithmetic and geometric sequences and series to model situations and solve problems. You'll pretty much start this section on just finding patterns in numbers. So if you got 1, 3, 5, 7, what is the equation? What is the pattern of that equation, right? But this one is talking about sequence and series. So what's the series of this? So you're going to come up with equations. You're going to come up with limits to say, hey, this function gets close to 1. So the limit of this function is 1. What's the maximum of this function, right? And so again, you'll get into detail by that point, trying to prepare you and get you set up for calculus. And so this is the course sequence. If you guys have any questions on any of this topic information, if you need any more detailed information off of this stuff, please do let me know.